Next, case number 6 is Cooley's anemia or Mediterranean anemia. What do you see on the plain film on the left side? You see a chest, heart. Behind the heart, it has got a double density. It's not the left atrium, it's much below the left atrial level. The heart is slightly enlarged. And if you look at the part of the ribs, there is some osteoporosis. And then because he came with paraparesis of the lower limbs, they did a myelogram. Today nobody does a myelogram because it's all CT myelogram or even better MRI. You can see the bones, the ligaments, the soft tissues and the spinal cord. And a myelogram, there is definite obstruction, clear-cut obstruction. This is the mass behind the heart, retrocardiac mass is extramedullary hemopoiesis, posterior mediastinal mass. And then how does it form? There are several theories. The hypermedullosis of the spine of the vertebra squeezes its material and forms a mass, or the lymph nodes in the retrocardiac area can get deposits of extramedullary hemopoiesis and become big. This is Cooley's anemia with extramedullary hemopoiesis. Next, number 7 is intracranial hemorrhage, sudden onset of unconsciousness in a young man, hemorrhage. If you take a plain film, there may not be anything. Sometimes with an injury, there may be a fracture, something. But the contents are more important than the container. So today, plain film of the skull doesn't have much contribution to such sudden unconscious patients. It is classical of hemorrhage, intraventricular hemorrhage. There's nothing, even MRI may not help, but typical of CT findings, intracranial hemorrhage. He may be hypertensive. He may have a AV malformation. He doesn't have a history of injury. Any cryptic aneurysm can rupture and produce hemorrhage. And then case number 8, partial agenesis of right lung. 3-dimensional view of the chest. You could see the trachea beautifully. You could see the left bronchus and branches. Right bronchus is atretic. The right hemithorax is small. Classical of partial agenesis of the right lung because of the bronchial atresia. It's not complete atresia. Bronchial stenosis. A little bud of the lung is. This again is a classical picture, and a plain film also you can diagnose. But this is just to demonstrate the 3-dimensional view of the bronchus and the agenesis. The agenesis could be complete cutoff of the bronchus. Agenesis should be at the level of the alveoli, at the level of the bronchioles. This is at the level of the major right bronchus, partially stenotic and partially atretic. Case number 9, cone view with a pressure balloon in the right lower quadrant because he is complaining of chronic pain. This is a small bowel study, concentrated ileocecal region because right lower quadrant pain is common in most of the, of course, majority of the time it is appendicitis, but that, apart from that, here you see the distal ileum, the small diverticula. This is ileal diverticulosis. Diverticula of the GI tract are not uncommon, either acquired or congenital. Esophageal diverticula, we have seen, Zenker's diverticula, stomach diverticulum at the cardiac end, and duodenal diverticula, small bowel diverticula, but this ileal diverticula, congenital ileal diverticula. Occasionally, in Crohn's disease, or even tuberculosis, or any other inflammatory disease, you may get a pseudo-diverticular with stenosis, but these are congenital diverticulosis. What is the importance? Any diverticulum can get stasis of the foot. Whenever there is stasis, there is infection. Whenever there is infection, there may be ulceration. So complications include diverticulitis, perforation, and hemorrhage. Occasionally, malignant transformation also may take place in one of the diverticula. And because of the stasis, sometimes enteroliths are formed, stones are formed, calcification of the debris is formed. This is uncomplicated ileal diverticulum. Number 10, again cone view, angiogram. You see the tortuous aorta and see the right renal artery well displayed, but it's not normal. In the beginning there is stenosis, there is a beaded type of appearance, And whenever you see this, think of fibromuscular dysplasia. Histologically and morphologically, there are 5 types of fibromuscular dysplasia: intimal dysplasia and adventitious hyperplasia. Like that, there are 5 varieties, but this is classical of fibromuscular dysplasia. More common in women between 30 and 40. Often they come with history of hypertension. Right side is more common on the left. And this fibromuscular dysplasia, although it is common in the renal artery, but it can occur in the carotid vessels. I have seen in peripheral vessels also. But most common is renal artery. Number 11, young child not faring well. If you look at the hands, they are dense. The bone age is consistent with his chronological age, but the bones are dense. Not only dense, there is an inset, a bone in a child. So it must be a congenital or developmental abnormality. Dense bones, immediately you think of osteopetrosis, or the so-called marble bone disease. Can any other entity produce the same thing? Yes, pycnodysostoses. But then, in pycnodysostoses, there is osteolysis of the distal phalanges. Here, distal phalanges are now. Also, there is another entity called idiopathic hypercalcemia with pulmonary artery stenosis, so-called Williams syndrome. But then, there's a rather rare condition. Here, this is classical, bone-in-a-bone appearance in osteopetrosis. Complications include regular fractures, healing well, and then occasionally, in fact, these patients terminally die with a leukemia. And then, case number 12, both hands are given. The patient presents with deformities. What do you find? Take any particular lesion, it is expansile. Obviously, it is benign because the transaction zone is narrow. And there is a hazy ground glass appearance in the matrix. Sometimes they may get a small calcific densities. But most important is bilateral, not symmetrical. Each one is its own, deforming the phalanges and metacarpals. Whenever you see an expansile, elongated lesion with ground glass appearance, and then benign, think of fibrous dysplasia. Fibrous dysplasia is a developmental abnormality with fibrous aberration in the development of the bone. And there are 3 varieties. Monostotic, obviously this is polyostotic fibrous dysplasia. And then in these cases, you may do a skeletal survey and find out several, from head to foot, several bones being involved. In a monoosseous fibrous dysplasia, only one bone may be involved. Often it is the iliac bone or a rib. And then there is a third variety called Albright syndrome, that is fibrous dysplasia in girls with precocious puberty and also skin pigmentation. This goes by the syndrome, Albright syndrome. Of course, this is bilateral, so this is a polyarticular, polyosseous fibrous dysplasia. Next, little finger, painful swelling. What do you find? Expansile, aggressive, ballooning out lesion of the 5th metacarpal. And if you look at the edges, there is thin, narrow zone of transition, so it must be benign. The cortex may be broken, microfractures may occur, but there is no soft tissue swelling. The central portion is not calcified, and so obviously it's an aneurysmal bone cyst because it is expanding. The thinning of the cortex, the endostem is almost gone. Benign. Aneurysmal bone cysts, they occur any time between 5 and 30 years, and they are often benign. Any bone can get involved, including the skull, spine. In the spine, it is the vertebral bodies and posterior elements are more common. And one significant finding is it may cross the joint. This one lesion, benign lesion, that may cross the joint. The cartilage is no bar because of its aggressiveness. And of course, classically, if you take CT or MR, you get fluid levels. And aneurysmal bone cyst can be primary, as in this particular case, or secondary also. In the sense, In giant cell tumors, you can get aneurysmal bone cyst. In telangiectatic osteosarcoma, you can get aneurysmal bone cyst. In fibrous dysplasia, you can get aneurysmal bone cyst. But anyway, this is primary aneurysmal bone cyst. 14. Young man with epileptic seizures. Plain film did not show much. And on CT, you find multiple calcific densities. Subependymal, some of them. This is very classical of tuberous sclerosis. Tuberous sclerosis is a triad clinically. That is seizures, cutaneous sebaceous cysts on the face, and osseous changes. You can get tumors in the bones also. You get angiomyolipoma in the kidneys. And so typically this is a triad, but in this particular case I only showed you the CT film and showing the subependymal calcifications. Sometimes they are big, like tumors. That's why it is called tuberous sclerosis. Sometimes there may be big gliomata with calcification. Then, case number 15, what you see is a bladder. I didn't give you the entire IVP picture because that will be obvious in the sense there is a right duplicated kidney. The upper moiety, the ureter, the lower end of the ureter of the upper moiety inserts ectopically and produces a ureterocele. This defect, this big radiolucent defect that you see in the bladder is an ectopic ureterocele. Ureterocele is a dilatation of the lower end of the ureter. It could be non-ectopic too. Occasionally, sometimes it is common bilaterally, only 10% of the time. But then the ectopic ureter may be in the bladder or in the perineum, anywhere in the perineum. And often it produces symptoms of obstruction and the patient had dysuria. So this is a typical presentation of ureterocele that is ectopic. This is what is called simple ureterocele also, where the lower end of the ureter gets dilated and you find a lucency, mucosa, simulating cobra head appearance. Then number 16, again oblique views of and AP views of the neck. You find a big mass, calcific mass, that is displacing the trachea to the contralateral side. And what are those calcifications? Some nodular calcifications, ring-like calcifications we have looked closely. Whenever we say ring-like or arc-like calcifications, think of an osteochondroma. It's an osteochondroma arising from the posterior part of the right first rib. First they thought clinically there is a thyroid swelling, but it's unilateral, it's hard. And radiologically it is classical of a osteochondroma. Only thing, because of the big mass, you may write chondrosarcoma, but there is no big soft tissue swelling. You can say chondrosarcoma, only the calcifications are dispersed, not arranged in a localized way. If they are dispersed, peripherally displaced with a soft tissue mass, then you can think of a malignant chondroid lesion such as chondrosarcoma. This is a simple osteochondroma. You may not see the first rib clearly, but you can say it is osteochondroma. Then female, case number 17, a female, no contrast is given. You see some densities in a mass, and those densities resemble teeth. Very simple. Even an undergraduate could diagnose that is a dermoid, a teratodermoid. Occasionally, if you look at, take a film in the erect posture, you may find fluid levels. Often it arises from the ovary, and it may be placed anywhere in the midline or in the left upper quadrant, left lower quadrant, anywhere, depending upon the size. This is a typical appearance of a teratodermoid arising from the ovary. Now case number 18, obviously tuberculosis. Why obvious? Because you are given a knee and there is erosion of the lower end of the patella. Irregular erosion. It's not a tumor. Chondroblastoma can occur, giant cell tumor can occur in the patella. Occasionally metastasis can occur. But in the young man, with a soft tissue swelling localized, infrapatellar tendon is a little thickened, erosion, this is tuberculosis. Obviously, you can't make a spot diagnosis of tuberculosis. In your own mind, think of all the differential diagnoses. In a young male with erosion, soft tissue swelling, think of tuberculosis. Case number 19. You are given a hand of a child and expanding lesion, eccentric, with a hook-like appearance. It can't be gout. There is no tophus calcification. It is an echondroma. Chondromas can occur inside the bone, enchondroma, that's common, or echondroma, eccentrically placed, or occasionally there may be parasteal chondromas too. This is a single echondroma. Occasionally there may be an exostosis projecting out, either sessile or pedunculated, but this is a chondromatous lesion and eccentric. You should write eccentric chondroma or echondroma. Even if you write chondroma, you will be correct in your answer. Case number 20, it's rather difficult, I told you. What is the lesion? Is young adults, pain in the heel area. You find a lytic lesion, and again it's benign. It is in the apophyseal region, extending to the body of the calcaneum. No calcifications, but still you have to think of a benign tumor. What kind of benign tumors? It's not so osteoblastic to think of osteoblastoma. It's a chondroblastoma. It's a typical appearance of a chondroblastoma. Although there are no calcifications, only 30% of them calcify. They arise from the epiphysis or apophysis and extend to the body or metaphysis. This is tough, I know, but you have to think in terms of chondroblastoma. It's not a giant cell tumor. Now, I'm sure you have answered all the 20 cases correctly. But then we'll come to the unusual case. Why is it unusual? Look at the hand. I said anatomical variation. Look at the radius. Obviously, it is in the lateral side. Look at the ulna. It should be in the medial side. But if you look at the corpus, where is the scaphoid? Scaphoid should be on the radial side. It is on the ulnar side. It is an unfortunate patient. You see, he was disarticulated the wrist, and immediately they brought the hand, and the plastic surgeon in a hurry, with the help of a vascular surgeon, stitched it up, but in a reverse way. So as I said, it's unusual. It's an unfortunate case of reverse implantation or transplantation of the auto-transplantation, rather, of the wrist with the radius. I hope all of you got right, and I wish you all the best.